Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Russell Rhoads, Associate Clinical Professor of Finance at Indiana University. He joins me to discuss why VIX is braced for a more volatile than average December. Russell, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks. Before we get into December, let's start with what options traders typically focus on for year end and what they look for into the following year.
Absolutely. Well, but typically year end, and you'll hear this phrase Santa Claus rally, which different people have applied to different time frames using different indexes, et cetera. Used to be it was the last 5 days of the trading year and then the first couple of days of January. People have expanded that to the period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I just took a look at what the NASDAQ does between Thanksgiving and Christmas, looked at over the last 25 years. If you had bought the NASDAQ, the index the day before Thanksgiving and sold it on the last day of the year, every year for the last 25 years, you would have broken even. So there's not much of a not much of a Santa Claus rally in there, but 2000 and 2002, the market dropped over 12% both those years between those two holidays. So on average, usually we have about a rise. If you throw those out, we have a rise of about 1%. However, I took a look at what happens if we're in a bullish market. And I defined a bullish market as the NASDAQ being up 15% or more as of the day before Thanksgiving, which it was last Wednesday. So it applies very well to this year. And the average moves about 2.5% for the NASDAQ 100 through the end of the year on years that we're in what I'll call a bullish market. And there are actually only 2 years where the market has dropped between Thanksgiving and New Year's, 2014 and 2021. And in fact, 2021, we were down less than 0.4%. So 2014, we were down a little less than 2%. So where the market is as of Turkey Day, it really has us squaring up for some bullishness into the end of the year for the NASDAQ 100.
But you're also saying that VIX is braced for a more volatile than average December.
It
So it sounds a little bit
is.
different. Yeah.
Isn't it great when you can go on programs like this and you can take both sides and you're going to be half right? Now, well, what VIX is telling us, and anybody that watches VIX and the VIX futures on a regular basis will be aware of the December VIX future typically has a little bit more headwind than other VIX futures contracts because of the way VIX settlement works. There are more holidays in December, and that puts a little bit of pressure on VIX futures. We're not seeing that this year. It's the first year we haven't seen it really since we've had VIX futures going back to 2008, where the December contract has remained at elevated levels. And there have been different opinions on that one. We're living those opinions right now. One is we get the next FOMC decision before December VIX expiration. This is a pretty big meeting. I mean, where the odds are pretty high that we're going to get a cut. We did go through a period of time over the last few weeks where the odds were under 50% for a cut around this meeting. So the uncertainty has been there, but it's kind of gone away. But this is the last meeting for 4 of the current voting members, and the composition changes going into 2025, 26. So there's uncertainty around that. I've been doing a roadshow with a couple of other professors at IU talking about the markets, and one of the other professors pointed out he couldn't remember when we had dissension on the Fed in both directions, where there are people saying that maybe we need to cut, and there are actually a couple of people thinking maybe we need to raise rates. We've never seen that much dissension. So VIX is probably remaining elevated in front of that meeting. And kind of is hindsight. I wish I had thought of this one before, but we have this slew of economic data playing catch up from the government. And that slew of, maybe there was this anticipation that we would be dealing with an inordinate amount of information coming at us. And that's why the December future contract remained at somewhat of a premium. And it's very US specific. European volatility is showing that Christmas seasonality. US is not. So it's got to be something that's very US specific. And my guess is the economic numbers in the Fed.
So, Russell, there's some nuances here. Does uncertainty necessarily mean to the downside or
Not
negative?
necessarily, not
Right.
at all. And we do associate VIX and implied volatility with being a downside measure. S&P 500 sells off. How much was VIX up today? That's the next thing you're going to hear from the reporters. But there is an anticipatory component to VIX, and we see it every once in a while in front of a big economic number or in front of an FOMC meeting. And so that anticipatory, that component of VIX pricing will get in there. And I think it will be in there until about the middle of December, and then it will fall off as we get past the catch up on economic numbers, have a little bit more clarity to the Fed, and we see some of that usual year-end bullishness.
Yeah.
So,
Because we saw this a number
bullishness
of
with
times this
excess
year.
volatility is very possible.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it a couple times this year, I mean, relatively recently as well, where everything was up, right?
Yep.
Gold, stocks, digital assets, VIX was up, everything was up. So it doesn't always mean negative. So I'm glad you're able to clarify that distinction. Uncertainty is a very different thing than bad news.
Exactly, exactly. And there are different ways of measuring skew,
Mhm.
and you can get an idea as to how much is the put side of the SPX strip driving VIX's direction at different times. And sometimes it's kind of elevated. Right now, it's actually not as elevated across the board relative to call implied volatility as you would think with VIX remaining at relatively high levels. So it definitely does not have a directional component to it. I'm glad you asked that. That was kind of off script, and I'm really glad you asked that.
I've learned a lot over the past 15 years from you. So, it's finally paying off. All right. Appreciate the insight as always, Russell. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.